Hi there, I'm Don.
And hi, I'm Cindy. Welcome to Pearls of Liberty for December 14th, 2013. Baby, it's cold outside. I hope that you're enjoying the Christmas season so far this year. We want to begin today with an article, Media Matters Declares Victory. The war on Fox is over. I'm not exactly sure what they are basing that on. What do you think they consider their victory to be?
I don't know, but the comment that I liked was actually in an Alex Jones Infowars story where Alex thanked Media Matters for declaring what they were really all about, and that is um, that they are actually targeting the alternative media now. So I think what that means is that they've moved on from Fox. They're considering that Fox is no longer relevant and that the real competitor of the state-run media is the alternative media. Not that Fox wasn't state-run, but that it's the battle. What they're saying is the battle between the left and the right factions of the New World Order in terms of their media in the United States, being the Fabian Socialists or the National Socialists, has been won by the Fabian Socialists, the left group, and now that left group is out to attack the alternative media. And that is what this story is all about. So, yeah, I think that's what they're saying, and whether or not that's true, whether or not the Fabian Socialists have really won in terms of the global power structure, I'm not entirely sure. I think the thing could shift, assuming that the people don't um, actually get control back right away. If the game continues, it could go on to another administration and it could shift to the right and the National Socialists could be back in charge. But what Obama has done as the leader of the Fabian Socialists in the United States is to put forward a purposely failed Obamacare or national health care plan that is basically a fascistic plan, so that, and intending it to fail, so that the the alternative would have to come in, and that would be the single-payer state-run plan instead of private insurance companies. Now, so the plan is meant to bankrupt um, the insurance companies and bring in the need for the state to solve the problem. So that's where you get the Fabian Socialists, the left, having won. So, of course, the battle is first in the media, and then it later gets worked for the hearts and minds, and then later gets worked out in the details of the actual procedures and legislation. More and more, it's by fiat, but the pseudo legislation. So that's a rundown of how I see what's going on, and their the bold claim of the administration that they've defeated Fox News. Well, actually, I'm glad that people are going to the alternative media for news, because once we started to wake up, we didn't care for Fox anymore, and I think that has probably happened to a lot of people.
Sure. Well, there is this tug of war going on concerning the alternative media, and there's external pressure. I mean, we see all kinds of. I was noticing this morning on Facebook a lot of negative comments on an article that Natural News put up on Facebook, and so there's that external. I think there are more trolls probably being paid to try to discredit alternative media, and then even internally we have some conflicts, such as this one between Siebel Edmonds and Glen Greenwald, and the tweets from Glen Greenwald have been coming hot and heavy this week. And would you like to explain a little bit of background on what's going on between him and Siebel Edmonds?
Yeah, sure. It, Basically, Sibyl Edmonds is saying Glenn Greenwald isn't a real journalist, and I would have to agree with her. He's has not been known as being a journalist, so he's not really fundamentally playing the game by the rules of journalistic ethics, meaning you're serving the public interest and you're just getting the story out and you're being paid to do that by somebody who shares those goals. Well, Glen Greenwald is basically in this for profit, for hire, and is selling the story to the highest bidder, or the bits of the story as he parses it out. And apparently, Snowden's not really in charge anymore. He was the front man for the major leak. He didn't gather all that stuff himself, but he's the name and the guy that decided to take the heat. But Glen Greenwald's in control of the information, and basically he is more concerned about getting that out there in a way that is profitable than he is about getting the truth out. Because only 1% has actually come out. There's a ton that hasn't come out. So it's about controlling the leak. Now, having said that, which sounds pretty negative on Glen Greenwald, and what I've said, I don't want to take away from that in any way, but I suspect that this might actually be a strategy, and it might actually be a very wise strategy, because the more, quote, pure the journalism is in a corrupt system, the less penetration it has into that corrupt system. For instance, there's people that knew all this stuff about the V-chip and the spy legislation into the telecoms back in the 90s, and it made virtually zero impact on the people that were living their everyday lives. Well, things have changed. The internet is much more pervasive now than it was then, and the word is getting out, but it is, I think, questionable whether, if somebody did not use some financial smarts, whether it would have the penetration that it has. Snowden and the information in general has created a huge impact, and I think that's probably because it's being put out to the news sources that would be able to pay for it and create an appetite for the story. So I think it's I think you got to be flexible on this. You can't be a purist, because I think in the truth movement and the liberty movement over the decades, there have been people that have insisted on the truth only as they see it, and it just tends to marginalize and isolate them. You have to be able to work with the establishment in order to actually bring the establishment down. It's kind of like you have to be like a Trojan horse, and I think that's what's going on with Glen Greenwald. I am not totally sure, but I do know that that Snowden's not really the one in charge. Like I said, he's a front man, and the front man for the front man, or the press arm, is Glen Greenwald, and I think that he's been chosen because he is able to get past those scruples and get the story out into a broader audience.
I think this is definitely a time, just in light of these kinds of pressures. I think that we really need to be cautious about what we believe. And I think there's kind of a tendency, even among people who maybe are liberty people, we're so conditioned by the traditional news media to being able to just turn something on and listen or watch for a few minutes and know what's going on, which is really not the case. I mean, we have sources that we trust, but I think that it's important to just continue to filter, not having woken up, then just to be lulled back to sleep and accept, one source, or whether it's Alex Jones or whoever it may be that we tend to trust. Because if we do that, if we go back to sleep and stop filtering everything, then whatever source we all come to depend upon will become a target for being taken over, and we will once again find ourselves being lied to constantly without being aware of it.
Yeah, and so that means that we have to keep looking for the story behind the story. You have to keep thinking, keep seeking, and we never have all the truth. We're always learning. Things are fluid, and there's always nuances, and the powers that be are always trying to steer things, and more the focus of their trying to steer is the new media, the real media, the internet media. So that means we have to actually be ever more vigilant.
And in that context, and we've mentioned this before, Dutch Sense, the guy who produces the videos about HAARP and earthquakes and how the Earth systems have been manipulated by the elite, he received an offer from someone for pretty large sums of money to supposedly support his work. But of course, there's always a cost that goes along with that. When somebody is offering you money, you have to wonder, what do they want in return? And this is the video from Dutch Sense about his experience of being offered money. And the people who were offering him money represented themselves as being from OPPT, One People's Public Trust, and OPPT denied when Dutch Sense contacted them that they were indeed the ones who had made him this offer. So they may have been using, whoever offered Dutch Sense funding may have been using OPPT fraudulently, or perhaps OPPT wasn't being straight, who knows. That's the kind of backstory that I think you're referring to, that we need to look for, to find out, okay, look at Dutch Sense's history. What has he been trying to do? And the history of all the alternative media, if there's suddenly a shift, if they suddenly change their minds about something significant, it could be valid, because sometimes we find out that we've been wrong and we do change. I mean, that's what repentance is. But if someone's message seems to be getting watered down or isn't making sense in the context of what they said in the past, I think it's time to really look at that source. And if Dutch Sense was offered money, I would have to assume that other people were as well.
Yeah, and one recent example, just to give a real clear picture to that, is now this happened a while back, but there's been follow-up on it recently, and that is that when Rand Paul came out and endorsed Mitt Romney, that created quite a stir. And at the same time, his father, Ron Paul, had not conceded the primary elections to Romney, even though it was an extreme long shot. So people really wondered what was going on behind the scenes there, and some people think that Rand Paul had sold out. It's still really unknown what happened, but when even currently, in some videos that I saw recently at a recent press event in D.C., Rand Paul continued to stonewall, not respond to questions about why he did that. So that's an example, of an event. And then what I notice on Alex Jones is Alex will continue to mention Rand Paul in a very favorable light as a possible libertarian candidate and president in 2016, and basically not deal with that issue anymore. So I think there's something going on behind the scenes, and I think that means we need to continue to watch. Have these people, Alex included, been, quote, bought off in some way? Not necessarily by money, but just by some kind of a promise. Now, look, if you go down that road, that's actually going to hurt. And this is why I admire Siebel Edmonds and the approach that she's taken. I think that there is more, it's not maybe as simplistic as always digging for and reporting the truth as you know it. I mean, that's the ideal, but sometimes there's other factors that enter in that you have to recognize and bring forth, like I was just talking about. So that's an illustration of the whole principle of how much truth is being told and how much can we handle. It's a big question, and we have to continue to think about it. I can't help but go back to thinking about President Kennedy's speech of the President and the Press, in which he talked about secret societies and all of that. And it is so important for a free society to have a free press. And right now we don't, but we need to have a effective strategy for freeing the press. So remaining in a little bunker and being free is different from having a big bullhorn and being free, and we have to figure out how to get there. Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to mention, just because you were talking about well, and I was talking about getting paid off, I just happened to read in Exodus 23:8 about never taking a bribe. I read this morning, you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the discerning and perverts the words of the righteous. And that's what Dutch Sense was clearly being offered here, was a bribe, and he didn't take it, to his great credit. However, the bribe will often, I believe, if you think about it, I think it's pretty obvious, it will be disguised. It will be like the example that you were giving. It was not a great disguise, but somebody claiming to be somebody else. So if anybody came to me and says, we support what you want to do, we want to offer you money, I would say, well, let me see if you're for real before I accept your money. Let me see if what you're really about, and probe the source and find out who you're beginning to partner with, because a bribe will be disguised, and then you become the servant to that person because you become dependent on that income source. So you really have to be careful about disguised bribes.
Absolutely, and being bought off. And another Bible verse or passage, verse really, that kind of came in on the radar for me is this from Amos 8:5. And it's the people are saying, when will the new moon be passed, that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath, that we may trade wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel large, falsifying the scales by deceit. And of course, this is a part of a prophecy, and God is very displeased with this kind of behavior. And as I was reading this, it just triggered the thought that this is what has been done to us as the American people and the people of the world by the elite. The ephah is a unit of measure that was used, but people would buy grain by the ephah, and then the shekel was a unit of money. So what they're getting for their money is decreasing, because the shekel is requiring more weight of shekel to obtain less measure of grain. And I mentioned this to you the other day, and you said that this is precisely what the monetary system has done.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve dollar, FDR note, not FDR, FRN note, which started under, or became a promissory note under FDR. It didn't start out that way. The Federal Reserve note originally was backed by currency, and then it became a promissory note and a debt instrument. But anyway, that's beside the point. The main point is that what this verse is describing is inflation. It's describing how you get less for your money. And if you've ever seen that little chart that shows the actual buying power of the dollar since the implementation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, you'll see that that's exactly what's been happening. And this fraud, this monetary fraud, is by the money changers, is the very same thing that was the last straw that got Jesus crucified when he went into the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers. That was, after that, they said, hey, no more. We got to take this guy out because we can't have him ruining our game here. So whenever a Christian says to me that God doesn't really care about the monetary system, and that has been said to me, I have to say, I'm sorry, that God cares deeply about the monetary system, because the monetary system is the way in which we either have honest trade and commerce and exchange with one another, or we go into bondage to whoever is controlling a fraudulent system. And that is what has happened to America. There's just no getting around it. So we need to recognize that. Christians need to understand that the scales of economic measure have been severely distorted and are in control of the people who are really trying to enslave humanity.
Sure, and that wasn't, just to be clear, that inflation wasn't an oops. Inflation is intentional.
Absolutely.
And inflation, along with interest rates and the IRS, are the three instruments that have been used to deceive the American people out of their money, and that's what, falsifying the scales by deceit.
It's all being done slowly enough so that the people don't rise up and demand a change. Right now, we're coming to the end game, so people are seeing it, but we're just buried under this culture of narcissism and the frivolous entertainment, so that people don't even see the end game. Many people, some of us are seeing it, and that's why it's so important to keep your eyes single and your heart pure, and then you can see what's really going on.
In helping to understand what's going on, I found this Max Kaiser interview with Alex Jones yesterday very helpful, and particularly this one portion, and in the links I will have this set to start at this point. And Max Kaiser talks about the difference between what he calls virtuous capitalism and vicious capitalism, stating that virtuous capitalism is built on people kind of at the top realizing that when the people, the masses, have more money, the people at the top will make more money because they'll be able to sell to the people. So the virtuous aspect is, and Max Kaiser used Henry Ford as an example, the virtuous aspect is that the people will, the guys at the top will release cash to the people, and Henry Ford did this by raising wages. And the vicious aspect is what we're experiencing now, and that is realizing that people need money in order to buy things. So not raising wages, not supplying cash, but making credit very easily accessible, thereby trapping the people in debt and enslaving them, basically.
Yeah, and that's that's making it very clear, and Max just really pinpointed that.
Yeah, he really nailed it. It was an excellent interview. And just on the fly here, Alex also had Stefan Molyneux as a guest yesterday. And we'll give the links to both of these segments, the videos on YouTube of both of these segments. And he's just so incredibly well-spoken and such a wise, knowledgeable person.
I also appreciated Alex's intro to Stefan, because Alex was open and upfront about some of the criticism he's had of having Stefan on, because Stefan is an atheist. And many Christians would say, well, why would I want to listen to an atheist? This guy obviously doesn't have real wisdom, or he would know God. Well, I have to differ with you. There are people that have real wisdom about how the world really exists, but they might not have wisdom about the eternal things and their own soul. Or they might be in a pre-salvation state, and that's just the sovereignty of God as the way that their life is being managed by the Holy Spirit. So it's all good. You have to learn how to recognize wisdom in all kinds of packages, and I tell you, there are few people and maybe none that I can think of, that have the depth of insight into how the world really works that Stefan Molyneux has. There's another one, although not nearly as optimistic, so I don't care to listen to him as much, as Alan Watt. He also has a great deal of historical wisdom and can see the game plan being played out. But Stefan is very hopeful for humanity, and that is really exciting, because he really sees that the eyes of many people are being opened, and more people are seeing the abuses of government, not only now but throughout history. So this is a very good interview. I highly recommend it.
And we both have seen the new Hunger Games film, and this ZeroHedge article is very enlightening, related to the film and the message in the film, and it's a great review, great article.
Yeah, it wasn't actually written by ZeroHedge, but I was glad to see it here. That's one of the blogs that I read regularly, and he will often have really interesting articles from other places, and this was submitted by Jim Quinn of the Burning Platform blog, so I'll have to check out that blog. But have been interested in the Hunger Games because Cindy read the books and has told me about them, and I'm interested in how the idea of revolution is being portrayed to young people today, then that's the target of the books and the films. And also Donald Sutherland's portrayal of the president, the corrupt and tyrannical president, is very interesting, because I noticed that that Sutherland picks movies in which the corruptness of power is really portrayed. Another one I'm thinking of is Land of the Blind, where he plays an oppressed person who is a revolutionary and then becomes the leader, and he becomes just as corrupt. And so I think Sutherland is very interested in power. Some people I think Alex Jones is of the opinion that he wants socialism to come in as the solution, and that's my question about the Hunger Games. Is that leading to a revolution that is tending towards a collectivist socialist solution? At this point, I don't know, but I am basically seeing that it's not just it's not a simplistic view, because there are covert manipulations of power that are shown for what they are, and there is a revolution that happens within the revolution. So it is complex. That I'm reserving final judgment in terms of what kind of revolution or what kind of society the people in the books and what the author is promoting. I want to see what that is.
Well, it's certainly interesting, and there are a lot of fictional works, a lot of films that feature films and television programs that are portraying different degrees of betrayal by the government of the people. And it's difficult to know. Sometimes it feels like we're being conditioned to accept corruption as a normal MO of people in power. And sometimes it feels as if the corruption and evil are being exposed for what they are, and helping people to wake up and become aware of how they've been deceived.
Yeah, I think it is actually a strategy, and I know Alex Jones has expressed this, or I think he has, that they're taking it over the top in order to provoke a revolution that they want to manage and control. So I know it that these guys that are the long game con artists know that in the end of their con, that the con is exposed. Of course, they just try to hide in the shadows when that happens so that they can pose as the saviors and offer the solution, probably through some intermediaries, because if you said, my name is Rockefeller and I have the solution, that's not going to fly too well. But if you do it through intermediaries, then it has some chance of success. So I think that's what we need to be aware of and wary of. We need to realize that these people are expecting and even goading us into a revolution, and if we don't act wisely, then the future will be even more enslavement than the past. And not right away necessarily, but things like Agenda 21, that's a good bellwether. If that thing flies, then we've taken the wrong turn. We've gone down the wrong fork in the road.
So if we can continue to think as individuals and make decisions in our mind rather than be herded, we'll probably be a lot more likely to be able to stay on a good path.
Right. That's the absolute indicator, is whether we have the rights as individuals or whether individual liberty is being sacrificed for the so-called greater good. Because if you believe in man, if you believe in humanity, as the Creator has done, and He's given us free will to choose to follow Him, to not follow, to run our lives as we see fit, then that opens up a limitless potential for humanity. But if you restrict the freedom of the individual to, oh, you can't do that because the greater good is that everybody needs to do this, then you're being herded, and then your future is lessened, and that's a negative road that we don't want to go down. That's not to say that people can't choose to voluntarily, on an ad hoc basis, make decisions that are to cooperate with people to accomplish something, build a road, whatever, then that is a free will decision and not a mandated thing, such as working and having money taken out of your paycheck because that's what has to happen. I mean, the founders of the Republic, the American Revolution, knew that if you didn't own the fruits of your labor, you weren't free, and we've lost sight of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Taxation is a form of slavery, and historically free people in the world have not been taxed.
Well, there's a distinction that I want to make between an income tax and all other taxes. An income tax is blatantly makes you a slave. Other taxes don't necessarily make you a slave, but if you don't own the fruits of your labor and have 100% of that and then have the government levy some tax in order to accomplish some program, that's one thing, other than paying a tax to a foreign entity that is continuing to extract wealth from the nation. That's completely different. we need to be able to see good and evil, and our vision has become very clouded.
We probably need to discern good and evil and hear from God, and try to not be deceived.
Pray for the eye salve.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us for this week's Pearls of Liberty. We hope that you are having a pleasant weekend and that your holiday season has been enjoyable so far.
And as always, we remind you to see the world the way that it really is. See yourself in it, not escaping from it. Walk your walk. You are the one you've been waiting for.